Hi, my name is Damien, and you may recognize me from the hit show Married with Children. I was in the studio audience, but I was really loud. You ever wish you had your own personal cheerleader, just to cheer you on? Be aggressive, passive aggressive, woo! I've been thinking about the Bible character Job for a bit lately. He's come up several times in conversation this last week. And as I think about him, I think, why isn't his name spelled J-O-B-E or J-O, the line above the O, J-O-B? So as not to be confused with Job. That's just my opinion. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't even know why I brought it. Forget I brought it up. It doesn't matter. Job is an interesting story, but I'll admit it can be a tough read. It kind of drags for a while. And I read somewhere recently that maybe that was the point. Maybe the author used that as a literary device so that we would feel the same feelings that Job was feeling as we read it. We would feel what Job felt. And what Job felt was this sense of when is it going to end? And I think that before 2020, I couldn't quite relate with that. But now after 2020, I think I get it. I think I can relate to that feeling of when is it going to end? And I don't know, maybe you can too. If you're unfamiliar with the story of Job, I'm not going to read all 42 chapters to you, but if you'll allow me, I'm going to try to summarize it as succinctly as possible. Job is described as a good and godly man. And he has a wife, he has 7 sons, 3 daughters, he has a lot of servants, he's got a lot of land, he has a lot of livestock, he's got a lot of sheep, and he's got a lot of money. He's doing very well for himself. He has been living a blessed life. One day there's this kind of roll call in heaven, and all the angels present themselves. They're all standing before God, including, of all beings, the devil. Now, that might sound a little odd, I'll admit, that the devil's there before God. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that the devil is not the equal opposite of God. The devil, Lucifer, is a fallen angel. He's a created being. And God, in his graciousness and his mercy, has chosen to not yet obliterate the being that he has created, no matter how wicked he's become. And when you think about it, in a way, that should be kind of encouraging to us. But anyway, the point is that God is still God, and the enemy is not his equal. The enemy has no power or authority over him. God asks Satan to give an account of what he's been up to. And the devil, he's like, I've just been roaming around hither and thither looking for people to mess with. And then God starts bragging about his boy Job. He's like, Job, he's a good guy. He's a good and godly man. And he's hyping him up. He's bragging about Job. And the devil says, well, yeah, of course he's so good and godly. You made him so fabulously wealthy. But if you were to take away all that wealth and let me at him, he would surely curse you to your face. Now, God's no dummy. He's not worried or tricked by anything that the devil says. And for all the faith that Job has in God, God has faith in Job. And so God says to the devil, all right then, do whatever you want to Job's stuff, but don't you dare lay a finger on Job himself. Satan wastes no time and gets right to work. And what follows has got to be one of the worst days that any human being has ever had to endure. In a single day, all Job's livestock are either stolen or killed, his servants are killed, and his 10 children are all killed. Job, consumed with grief, is eventually able to cry out those immortal words, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." This, of course, frustrates Satan. So the next roll call, he says to God, skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life, but reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face. At this point, I'd like to remind you of a quotation from Mother Teresa, who said, I know God will not give me anything I can't handle. I just wish he didn't trust me so much. God permits Satan to mess with Job some more. He's like, you can mess with his health, but you can't end his life. And so Satan, he gives Job these sores, these awful sores all over his body, from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. He's got these sores, and everything is, has collapsed around him. So he takes these broken pieces of pottery and he's just digging them into his sores to try to find some sort of relief. And to make matters worse, his spouse is of no help, no encouragement. His wife is just saying, why don't you curse God and die already? Which is not the most uplifting thing for a spouse to say. And so Job, he goes over to his friends and he's looking for some comfort, some support from them. And they're like, dude, you must have really messed up bad to be suffering like this. God must hate you to let you suffer like this. Thanks, guys. For something like 35 or 36 more chapters, this just goes on. Job's wife and his friends they're just heaping insult upon injury. And Job, for his part, he stands his ground, he holds his faith, and he says, look, I know I'm not perfect. I also know, though, that I haven't done anything to deserve all this awful stuff that's happening in my life. And I don't know why God is allowing this to happen. But I do know that God will vindicate me in his own time, and he's going to prove all you haters wrong. And then in chapter 31, Job says, let God weigh me on the scales of justice, and he will make known my integrity. There really are a few beautiful golden nuggets to be mined in the book of Job. But the majority of it is Job lamenting his horrible situation and his spouse and his friends not being very encouraging at all. And before long, you find yourself right there with Job, just begging God to intervene already. To Job's surprise, God does show up. But when he shows up, he doesn't give an explanation to Job. He doesn't explain himself to Job's wife or Job's friends. In fact, one could argue that when God shows up, he shows up with a little bit of sass and attitude. He says to Job, he's like, who are you to question my wisdom with your ignorance? And then he tells Job to stand up, to be a man, and God gives him what for? Have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to rise in the east? Can you direct the movement of the stars? Can you direct the constellations through the seasons? Do you know the laws of the universe? Can you shout out to the clouds and make it rain? Can you make lightning appear and cause it to strike as you direct? Then he goes on for a few chapters until God says to Job, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? As a believer, I can't help but just be blown away by how awesome God is. But as just another person, just another human being who goes through tough times like any other human being does, I can't help but think that this isn't the most encouraging book to read. I don't think that comfort is the purpose of the book of Job. Now, fortunately, there's no shortage of other comforting passages you can read elsewhere in Scripture. In fact, there are comforting passages you can read in Job. But I think that the purpose of the book of Job is to remind us that God is God and that we are not. To remind us that in life, bad things will happen. And we may not understand why. But our job isn't to understand why. Our job is to hold on to faith, to hold on to hope, to trust God, to trust that the Lord will bring vindication because it will come. Sometimes bad things are permitted to happen in our lives and we have to suffer because of it. And sometimes bad things happen because bad people do bad things and we are, for whatever reason, unfortunately, stuck having to deal with the consequences, the repercussions. Now sometimes, and I don't mean to step on anyone's toes here, but sometimes bad things happen because bad people do bad things, but we don't get out of the way of it. We don't remove ourselves from it. And so we stay there. For whatever reason, we stay there and we're stuck dealing and suffering with the consequences of this bad stuff that we could get out of. And then, to be perfectly honest, there's also times when the bad things that happen and the suffering that ensues is our own fault. It's stuff that we know we shouldn't have done, but we did anyway, and we're having to deal with the repercussions of our sins, and we're very upset about it because we're suffering, but we don't want to admit that we're wrong. We don't want to admit it's our fault, and so we puff ourselves up, and we try to be very pious, and we're like, oh no, not today, Satan, the devil's attacking. Not today, Satan. But the devil's over there, just like, oh, thank God. I don't have the strength to deal with your drama today. Oh, and that business there, that's all you. I have nothing to do with that. Something we can learn from Job is that even though he was good and godly, he knew he wasn't perfect and was able to admit when he was wrong and work on it. In chapter 42, after being given what for by God, Job says to God, "You asked, 'Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance?' It is I, and I was talking about things I knew nothing about." Be real. And even if you were really wrong, learn from it and do better next time. Another thing that I believe we can learn from Job is the importance of friendship. The importance of having real friends, of having good friends in our lives, of friends who believe in us, friends who encourage us to greater things. What you need is a cheerleader. The problem is there seems to be a shortage of cheerleaders in this world. The problem is that too many people don't have friends who are their cheerleaders, and so instead they settle for friends who are really their enablers. Now, does this mean you can't be friends with any people like that? I don't know. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's not the point I'm making. But I do believe that it is very important that in all your friendships, you are keenly aware of who is influencing who and to what. A good friend, a real friend, sees where you're at and loves you just the way you are, while also seeing the good, the potential in what you can become. A good friend may not always tell you what you want to hear, but they'll always tell you what you need, hopefully with a little tact. False friends or enabler friends, they might be fun for a while, but they just encourage your self-destruction, all in the name of a good time or escapism. But when things go bad, where are they? They're nowhere to be found. Cherish the friends who are willing to make you a little bit mad because they love you enough to tell you the truth, and because they're loyal enough to stick by you even through the thick of it. Friends like that are a godsend. And they make pretty great personal cheerleaders. Give me a Y-O-U. Give me an R-O-C-K. What's that spell? You rock! Look, I'm not a cheerleader. I'm just really trying here. And of course, the most important lesson that we can learn from Job is that no matter how bad things might get, no matter how tough things may be, hold on to hope. Hold on to faith. And trust God. Oh, and just so you know, God does restore to Job all the things that he lost, and he blesses him even more than he had been blessed before. In fact, the book of Job ends with this verse. Then Job died at an old age, having lived a full life. No matter what dramas or stresses, trials or tribulations you might be facing, hold on to hope. Spend some more time with your personal cheerleaders and try as best you can with all your might to live a full life. Thank you so much for joining me today and hearing what I had to say. I hope that you learned something and were maybe even encouraged a little bit along the way. And know this, if your heart has seen better days before, I promise you, you can see better days again. Oh, thank God. That doesn't work.